Hi, I'm Greg.
I'm Betsy.
And this is Going on 30, a Popping Collars side project where we look back at movies nominated for Best Picture 30 years ago. This month, we are looking at Mississippi Burning.
You have to say it that way. That makes it sound like this movie's about warlocks or something. That's not a proper introduction.
All right, fine.
All right.
This month, we're looking back at Mississippi Burning.
I am sick and tired of going to the funerals of black men who have been murdered by white men.
They are powerless against us if every single Anglo-Saxon Christian one of us stands together.
The rest of America don't see it that way, Mr. Mayor.
The rest of America don't mean a damn thing. You in Mississippi now.
You had us scared to death, man.
Don't you call me man, boy.
Did it ever occur to them they're going to end up dead?
The moment those 3 kids disappeared, it was news.
The moment the 3 civil rights workers disappeared, it was news.
Somebody told you to stand up, get out of here.
You'd kill Frank? Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't give it no more thought than wringing a cat's neck.
These people crawled out of a sewer, Mr. Ward.
We do not accept Jews because they reject Christ. We do not accept Papists because they bow to a Roman dictator. We do not accept Turks, Orientals, nor Negroes.
We're not killers. That's the difference between them and us.
That's the difference between them and you. Did you smile when the bulldozer ran over the black kid's body?
We're here to protect Anglo-Saxon democracy and the American way.
What's wrong with these people?
1964, when America was at war with itself.
I have a recap of Mississippi Burning. Would you like to hear it?
Is it shorter than the recap on IMDb? Let's see.
It is 2 sentences.
Ooh, that's going to be pretty good. Okay, let's hear it.
All right, here we go. A fictionalized version of the murders of 3 civil rights activists on June 21st, 1964 in Mississippi. 2 FBI agents, Agent Anderson, played by Gene Hackman, and Agent Ward, played by Willem Dafoe, come in to solve the case.
Okay, the only thing you left out was that they have wildly different styles, the 2 agents.
They are.
That was good, though. That was good.
They are a mismatched pair. Betsy, what's your history with Mississippi Burning?
This is of the 5 movies we're looking at, one of 2 that I had actually believe I had seen. Yes. So I think I saw this. I don't know whether I saw it in the theater, but I do remember the movie. I might have seen it on television.
Interesting.
I'm not sure.
I know the box art of this. It's kind of like when I was working at the video store, the Hollywood Video, back in the 90s.
Yes.
There's some box art on VHSs that catch your eye. This one was one of those with like the burning cross and the 2 and Hackman and Dafoe on the front of the box. When I looked at it and I looked at the title, I was like, that sounds like homework more than like watching a movie.
Well, and I think it is good to be clear that this is a fictional account,
right?
That it is very close to the murder of Cheney and the 2 other poll workers. So we're close, but we're not really telling that story.
Also, I should say history with this movie wise, growing up in North Carolina in the South.
And I was growing up in Alabama.
This was not the kind of movie that would have been like this would have been like, and not to say that people would have actively said, no, you can't go see that movie, but this wouldn't have been a movie that would have been promoted highly where I was growing up.
Well, and in Alabama, we were always up for making anytime Mississippi could appear lower than us. It was a moment of like, oh, okay. Yeah, look how bad they are.
Yeah.
But I mean, this, watching this movie again, holy moly.
Yeah, right. Why don't you take us off? What's your hot take on this one?
This was a really hard movie to watch. And I think it's a really hard movie to watch in 2019 with some stuff now in the rearview mirror with the language and how we are at the moment as a country. It was difficult to watch because you just see all the footprints, all the seeds, and that they're still growing and that this isn't something that's gone. And I don't know whether the movie makers at the time thought that. I don't think so, based on some of the reading I've done about the movie. But that it was rough. And I know Hackman had really made a point of saying, I'm not going to do violent movies anymore.
Right.
And then he changed his mind and did this movie because it's violent on all fronts. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult. It's difficult.
And coming out of this movie, he specifically said, because when he was up for Best Actor, the clip that they showed at the 89 Oscars was him beating up Brad Dourif out of context from this movie.
Right.
And he was so distraught by that scene being played out of context that he said, I'm never going to do a violent movie again because I can't have that be my work. And he had to be talked into Unforgiven by Clint Eastwood.
Well, and I think which also starred some of the same people that are in this movie. My other hot take was, we had talked about this movie before as being a movie about white people teaching you about the civil rights movement, mm-hmm. because there are some people who I recognize in this movie who have gone on to be, well-known black actors, but there really isn't a black protagonist. And watching it again, it made me realize, because the movie is not for black people.
Right.
This movie is for white people. And when I look at how Willem Dafoe is approaching it and how Gene Hackman is approaching it, I think that we're looking at two different ways
mm-hmm.
of approaching the racist South.
Yeah. I agree with you. So
do you agree with me on that?
Yes.
I haven't quite nailed down what those two perspectives are. But that was a take I walked away with.
No, I agree, because a lot of what Hackman is doing is he's playing this character as a way of confronting his own past.
Mm-hmm.
So the Anderson character, Agent Anderson, comes from a background where he was the racist sheriff from Mississippi. He's clearly evolved past whatever that point of view was.
And it's interesting because we don't really know how and why. We get allusions to a ending of a marriage, allusions to his relationship with his dad, but we don't really know what changed for him, which I think is interesting.
But now he's going back into a situation where he's essentially confronting himself,
mm-hmm.
a past version of himself. The only thing that I would say that makes it a little funky is that Hackman plays the character, especially early on in the film, as really smiley. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but he's kind of like this kind of like joking uncle kind of character for like the first hour, and it just doesn't. It feels off somehow.
And it ends in the bar. That ends when they're like, "Look, we're done with your shtick. Like we see you." And then there's Dafoe, who I see as being the outsider looking at the situation. And how many times does Willem Dafoe have the line of like, how can these people hate people like this? How can this keep happening? Why is this happening? And I think that is another way that people were looking at the South as well.
Mm-hmm.
How is this happening? Why is this happening?
You admire these kids, don't you?
Don't you?
I think they're being used. I think they're being sent down here in their Volkswagens and their sneakers just to get their heads cracked open.
Did it ever occur to you that maybe they believed in what they were doing?
Did it ever occur to them they're going to end up dead?
Maybe.
In Washington, they sure as hell knew, didn't they?
Some things are worth dying for.
Well, down here, they see things a little differently. People down here feel some things are worth killing for.
Where does it come from? All this hatred.
Just piggybacking off of what you said earlier about, man, there was some stuff that resonated. That's one of my notes. One of my notes is this has brutal echoes of modern problems. And the two things that I noted right off the bat were distrust of media.
Mm-hmm.
The population's distrust of what the media was reporting and how that's used nowadays. And also the other thing that I noted was an unwillingness of the community to confront problems that are ingrained in their society. Mm-hmm. These are things best left ignored, right? And it's not worth going. So, like, for instance, when Anderson and Ward walk into the restaurant that's separated whites and blacks, and Ward walks to the black section of the restaurant and starts asking questions of the patrons there. The whole time leading up to that, Anderson's like, that's not worth it. That's not worth transgressing on that. Like, stop. Like, you can't be an activist in this situation. It's that kind of stuff that I totally identify with in my experience of the South, which is, yeah, bad things may have happened, but we're not going to, like, you're only going to cause problems by bringing up the problem.
Well, and there's also, I think, too, what we hear now is the narrative of scarcity. There's not enough to go around, right? Like, Gene Hackman tells the story of his father and the man down the street, the black farmer down the street, who got a mule.
That was a big deal around that town. My daddy hated that mule. Because his friends were always kidding him about, they saw Monroe out plowing with his new mule, and Monroe was going to rent another field now they had a mule. And one morning, that mule just showed up dead. They poisoned the water. And after that, there was never any mention about that mule around my daddy. Just never came up. So one time we were driving down the road and we passed Monroe's place and we saw it was empty. He just packed up and left, I guess, gone up north or something. I looked over at my daddy's face and I knew he'd done it. And he saw that I knew. He was ashamed.
And the moral of that story is, if you're not better, and he used the N-word, quoting his father, if you're not better than this black man's son, who are you better than?
Yeah.
And then Defoe is like, well, I think that's just an excuse. And he says, no, I'm just telling you a story about my daddy.
Yeah.
And that element of there's not enough to go around. There's a hierarchy that needs to happen.
Right.
That is what we do in this country over and over and over and again.
A question for you.
Yes.
And this was just a question that I thought of while I was watching the film. Would this movie be better, worse, different if the Willem Dafoe character was black? It felt like if this were a modern movie, that would be the choice that would be made.
But I think if it's going to be a commentary on white reaction to what's happening in the South and during the Civil Rights Movement, I think it would be a different movie. Because it's, I don't know, being someone who I grew up in Alabama, but my family is not really from there. And so I was always, because everything, some of the things that, a lot of the things that happen there are super problematic and awful and just embarrassing. And so I would kind of other in a way of Willem Dafoe, like, well, I'm not one of these people. I'm not like that. So, while at the same time, I've learned the social cues and some of the stuff that that you mentioned with Gene Hackman. We just don't push the envelope on that. That one's not worth it. Yeah. Pick this over here, but don't pick that.
Yeah,
like that kind of thing. I don't think it would. It would be a different movie. What do you think?
Well, what I have is, if that's the case, then what would make this movie different from In the Heat of the Night?
Right.
I feel like by replacing Willem Dafoe and putting in a black actor, then I'm just basically remaking In the Heat of the Night.
Well, not exactly, because we've already determined that local law enforcement on the ground here is no good. So I think it's also dealing with the fact that the FBI aspect too, that they are coming in as other into the community. And then you would still, we're dealing with two law enforcement entities happening. And one has a lot of power in some instances and very little power in other instances. So still, yes, it would be similar, but a little different.
Yeah. Okay. I also have, this is a showcase of Hollywood character actors. This is like,
listen, we have got everyone's favorite racist, Michael Rooker, everybody. Rooker plays the best racist from The Walking Dead, this movie, to probably 6 other movies. I mean, you are
Rooker
correct.
Is always Rooker. There's never a moment where he's not this, like whatever this character is.
Whether he's an alien in Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's right. Even if you paint him blue, he's still this.
Still this guy. But you are correct. No, now, which character actors are you listing off when you think?
All right, so Stephen Tobolowsky, obviously, right?
Okay. Who did he play? Oh, yes.
Yeah. Groundhog Day. Yeah. Tobin Bell, I've got as character actor central, mainly because of the Saw phenomenon, right? But Tobin Bell's always that guy, and especially Pruitt Taylor Vince, who's always that guy. And you know him absolutely every time you see him with his little shifty eyes.
I feel like he's played a super racist too. I feel like he's also done that part in another film. Oh, and Kevin Dunn, who I just kept looking at and thinking of Veep. And I was like, and he's Mr. Bird, Agent Bird.
And apparently it's his film debut. This is his film debut. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So, it's interesting.
Nice.
Best scene from the movie.
Yeah, the mule scene I thought was good, and that they have all those historical lynching photos and all of that, and it's the first time the action kind of quiets, so that it's Defoe and Hackman really having a conversation with each other. I mean, that scene then gets piggybacked with that closing scene where the mayor's hung himself. And there's that great quote, are we just as guilty as the fanatics who pull the trigger if you just stand by and watch and pretend nothing is happening? Maybe we're all guilty. Right. Kind of that moment when, we move out from the characters to kind of indicting the audience.
My favorite scene is Frankie Faison's sermon, which I guess we probably should have included him in our character actors.
Actors. I mean, when I saw him, I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Who from Do the Right Thing and The Wire and all kinds of stuff. But his anger at the funeral of these boys played out with the violence going on as the FBI is
it's just one funeral.
Attempting to root out, the Klan, and then the Klan's violence against blacks. It's just all kind of being told in this montage with this sort of angry message going on in the background, and it's so compelling. It just that was the one that totally sucked me in, and it's Faison's delivery, and it's the images that are being shown to you, and that's the one where it's like you kind of pause the movie and you take a deep breath because you're like, whew, this is going for it.
They want me to say, let us not forget the two white boys also died helping Negroes help themselves. They want me to say, we mourn with the mothers of these two white boys. But the state of Mississippi won't even allow these white boys to be buried in the same cemetery as this Negro boy. I say, I have no more love to give. I have only anger in my heart today, and I want you to be angry with me. That I am sick and I am tired, and I want you to be sick and tired with me. I am sick and tired of going to the funerals of black men who have been murdered by white men. I am sick and tired of the people of this country who continue to allow these things to happen. What is an unalienable right if you are a Negro? What does it mean, equal treatment under the law? What does it mean, liberty and justice for all? Now I say to these people, look at the face of this young man and you will see the face of a black man. But if you look at the bloodshed, it is red. It is like yours. It is just like yours.
You know, be angry with me.
Yeah.
And I think being someone who is a preacher, you think about what you would say in those moments, and when you're really talking about your own emotional response, and also the kind of caught my heart kind of moments in the funeral, when the younger brother's at the graveside and kind of can't, and you can tell these are local actors, right, local folks, and really, the mom kind of grabs his hand, and then when Defoe is marching with the group, when he's walking with the group from the funeral. and he ends up kind of peeling off to go with Hackman and the new plan guys.
Yeah.
But I watched that and I was like, and I asked that question. I think it's asking that question: would this have been you?
Yeah.
If you had been there in '64 in this Mississippi town, would this have been you? Would you have walked?
Mm-hmm.
And because I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, of course that would have been me.
Yeah. Sure.
Would it have been you?
Best actor from the movie.
I have a soft spot for the Hacks. Gene Hackman. I find his energy completely magnetic. He is just such a great actor, and he is not a looker, not a traditional looker, you know. And he's coming out of that '70s movie time when not many people were lookers. There's a few people, but like a lot of the hard driving, gonna get it actors are not those guys. Then we've talked a lot about Hackman, so I guess I want to give my shout out to Darius McCrary.
Okay.
He plays Aaron, the little boy in the movie, who kind of becomes the kid who stands up.
Sorry about interrupting your meeting here, but we can't seem to get anybody to talk to us. Just zip up, like my mama used to say.
The reason people don't want to talk to you is because they're afraid it'll get back to the law.
We are the law.
Not around here, you ain't.
We were sent here to find out what happened to those 3 boys. They were here to help you.
It ain't colored folks you should be talking to.
Who should we be talking to?
Come on here.
You should start with the sheriff's office.
He in that moment talks to them because no one's talking to them. No one will speak to them, and they're gathered at the burned out church. And he's the one who talks, and he's then the one who convinces the boy who saw the guys plant the firebomb at the house to speak. And he's the one whose father is hung.
Mm-hmm.
I found him to just be, I saw him as, this kid shining through this role a little bit. As one of the few black actors in the movie who kind of has an identity inside the film. But I thought he did a nice job because there are a lot of children used in this film, particularly that closing scene where they're all singing. There's just a lot of children. Yeah.
I'm with you on Hackman. What I've got written down as my note, he's just so natural. Like he just feels so natural in a role that you can tell he has studied. He's done every sort of character work that he needs to do to embody whatever role it is that he's playing. Yeah, he's coming off of his big movie star run, won the Oscar for French Connection, coming out of the Superman movies, all of that stuff. And then this is kind of starting his, what I'm calling his, I'm going to be good in everything run of movies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like my rule of Morgan Freeman. If you put Morgan Freeman in a good movie, it makes it better.
Mm-hmm.
Put it in a really good movie, it makes it great.
Right.
That's kind of what Gene Hackman starts doing at this point. So he does like the Grisham movies, the Westerns, the Unforgivens, and the Quick and the Deads, and Wyatt Earp and stuff. All the way up to Royal Tenenbaums, where he's just, and it's just, he just elevates all the material that he touches. I guess I would say Frances McDormand is my best actor for this movie, though.
This whole thing is so ugly. Have you any idea what it's like to live with all this? People look at us and only see bigots and racists. Hatred isn't something you're born with. It gets taught. At school, they said segregation's what's said in the Bible. Genesis 9, verse 27. At 7 years of age, you get told it enough times, you believe it. You believe the hatred. You live it. You breathe it. You marry it.
Especially around this time. So this is like Blood Simple, Frances McDormand, early Coen brothers, like Frances McDormand. She does a lot of interior work with her face where you can see like she's working through the dialogue and like what the character actually thinks. Like you can sort of see it in her eyes and her facial expressions. And I think that's an interesting way of acting. I think that she does a great job with it.
This could have been a role that kind of could have been easily overplayed.
Yeah.
Easily overdone. You know, I just don't know what to do. It could have stepped, I mean, because let's talk about the Southern movie stereotypes, which I'm sure are based in fact, right? Yeah. Most sheriffs are fat.
Right.
There needs to be a tense, straight edge shaving scene.
Mm-hmm.
Most people like to have that done with a cigar in their mouth, right? Like there's a lot of Southern movie tropes happening here, and her role could have stepped very much into that as a female character in the movie of
racist with a heart of gold,
right? Victim, you know, but that she didn't play it that way, and that it took some time for her to kind of come to a place to have an ally to actually speak to. And it wasn't that, you know, yes, there was chemistry with her and Hackman in the movie for sure, but that wasn't the basis. It wasn't like he was coming in to say, I'm going to take you away from here.
No.
Yeah. And she was in the end staying in her like beat up old house. Yeah.
Right. And I always got the sense that she was bound to that town. Like there was no leaving for her. Mm-hmm. And I think that, she has that great scene where she's like, you just grow up in this and it just becomes part of you. Like you live it, you breathe it, you marry it. It's just, and there's no way out.
When she brought up that, Genesis verse from, Genesis 9, verse 27, this curse of Ham, and that being used is justification for slavery that she's heard in school.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you just steep in it, you don't always, and then the motivation to not say anything, because saying something's too hard.
Let's get some stats. Let's get to some stats.
Numbers.
About the movie. Opened on December 9th, 1988.
Merry Christmas.
It's funny, all of the movies that we've seen were December opens. So we're clearly in that awards.
Yeah, that's when you put your Oscar bait out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Domestic gross, it made $34 million, number 33 highest grossing movie of 1988. It is the number 2,463rd top grossing movie of all time, between Overcomer, our good friend Overcomer, the movie just came out this year.
Good God.
This is between Overcomer and Man on the Moon. Jim Carrey. Yeah. Came in just ahead of Jim Carrey's. 87% on Rotten Tomatoes. Kind of medium.
That's
kind of what you would expect.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those movies that I could see people being divided on.
I think I would have felt that way before I saw it again.
Yeah. It is tied for number 7 on the lowest scoring Best Picture nominees on Metacritic of the past 30 years. It's tied with The Prince of Tides.
No.
And our good friend Rain Man.
Oh, no. No. Oh.
So there are 3 movies from this Oscar cycle that are on the lowest scoring Best Picture nominees.
Wow.
Because The Accidental Tourist was also on this list.
Good Lord.
Roger Ebert loved it, though.
Loved it.
Ready? Mississippi Burning feels like a movie made from the inside out. A movie that knows the ways and people of its small southern city so intimately that having seen it, I know the place that I'd go for a cup of coffee and the place that I'd steer clear from. 4 out of 4 stars.
It knows the white people. It doesn't really feel like it knows the black people.
That's Raj. That's Raj. How did it do at the Oscars? 1 win. Betsy, what did it win for?
God, I don't know.
We've kind of hinted around it.
Is it cinematography?
It is.
Yes.
Dang.
Total guess.
Best cinematography.
Because it knows how to film a raging fire.
That's right. That's right. Nominated for a ton of Oscars, though. This was the big Oscar-nominated movie, along with Rain Man. Nominated for Best Actor, Gene Hackman. Best Supporting Actress, Frances McDormand. Best Director, Alan Parker. best sound and best film editing. Didn't pull in any of those.
Today in Jessup County, Mississippi, amidst the violence that has erupted here this week, the eyes of the nation have been firmly fixed on the search for the 3 missing civil rights workers.
Well, I think it's all a big hoax, but if they are in that swamp, then they asked for it.
Naval reserves have been brought in to join scores of FBI agents in their search for the missing men.
Well, I think they planned the whole thing. They're sitting up there in New York laughing at us Mississippi folks.
You think it's a hoax?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a big hoax. They ain't not gonna find nothing.
Civil rights leaders here are still optimistic as to the young men's whereabouts. But privately, there is mounting concern that they will ever be found alive.
They came down here looking for trouble, and I think they found it.
This is Merrick Barl-Bobby, Network News, Jessup County, Mississippi.
Let's talk about the legacy of this movie, which means we got to talk about race. We've already talked about this.
Yes.
It's a movie about race featuring majority white actors.
Yes.
Is that a tough look for this movie?
I think because I went on the HuffPost and I just Googled, movies about the civil rights movement, because I wanted to kind of see where this movie fell in the scheme of movies, right? And it's interesting as a fictional movie because it's on TV at the time that Eyes on the Prize is on TV. The Eyes on the Prize runs from 87 to 90, and that's your 14-part series chronicling all of the civil rights movement from 54 to 85. And so, but that's nonfiction. And there are a lot of not a ton of nonfiction things that come out before this. There's some things that come out near it, but this really is one of the in the fiction category that would have gotten a nationwide release without having the censor boards in the South kind of say, oh, well, sorry, we're not going to show Raisin in the Sun, or we're not going to show, I'm guessing, that we're not going to show, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner maybe, or we're not going to show In the Heathen Night 67. That this becomes an early fictional movie about the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether a different film could have gotten made on the, with the scope and sequence. Those other movies came later.
Right.
Telling more of the story of the African American experience.
Yeah, I think you nailed it at the beginning of this conversation when you said this is a movie about race that's starring white people. It's for white people to confront the sins of the 60s. I wonder if
and whether that's intentional or whether this was the movie that was going to be made in 1988.
I have another question about race, but I don't know if I know what it is that I'm asking. I said, how have movies about this subject changed and what stayed the same? But it occurs to me that I think that what's changed about movies about sort of examining race or civil rights is that for the most part, these are stories about struggles of African Americans. Like, that's what I think of when I think of civil rights movies. And this doesn't fit that narrative necessarily.
I agree with you.
So I don't know. It just makes me think that a movie about this subject today wouldn't be Gene Hackman and Willem Dafoe. It would be, yeah.
Now we're able to do movies like Selma and Malcolm X, or something that really puts you in a different place. And I think I kept looking at these local actors, and the trauma for these folks, that these are people who lived through this, or on the ground for this, and you're asking them to kind of step into that again. And that some of the folks, that big, some of the extras use their actual clan IDs.
Yeah.
As identification on set. So I'm like, I don't know what kind of insurance they took out. But they were really and what sort of discussion with local leaders.
Right.
You're going to come down here and film this movie because, we are not post race. now.
Liberals from Hollywood.
Much less, right, outside agitators, like that whole language thing too.
Mm-hmm.
The scene in the courtroom was one of the most infuriating.
Yeah.
I almost had to fast forward. I was so pissed off.
And brings us to the classic going on 30 question. Who is this movie for? Betsy.
White people.
Yes. I have a differentiate.
Do you have a nuance?
I have a nuance. This movie is for white Yankees.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because at the time, like I said, where I grew up, this wasn't like a movie where it's like, oh, you can't watch this. But it does smack of this idea of, oh, these people from Hollywood are going to tell me how I'm living my life wrong, and how my grandmother was racist and my great grandmother was racist and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And there's a certain kind of defensiveness that comes, and I think that it comes very much in the form of that family identity. I mean, there's ingrained racism, and I don't mean to imply that that this is white victimhood or anything like this. But when you grow up in the South, where I was anyway, in North Carolina, my family all lived on one road. Like, your family were your neighbors. Like, that's, it's just, you were tight, you were bonded. And to have a history that's steeped in something that's very evil, it's basically saying there's something illegitimate about this family that you've grown up in. And I think that that's the defensiveness that a lot of people react to when they're uncomfortable about examining how being white in the South, they may have benefited from that historically. Because Gene Hackman alludes to this with the mule thing. I grew up in a poor family on a tobacco farm, and every one of them would have said, I don't know what you're talking about, slaves. I'm a poor farmer on a tobacco farm in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina. Like, don't tell me how privileged I am, right? That's kind of the defensiveness that I hear.
Well, and that you see some of the hierarchy inside the white community too, whether it's with the Klan leader or the mayor or the law enforcement, then they hang other people out to dry inside, right. And that is all, that hierarchical thing is still at play. I think the way those interviews those media interviews are throughout, that was probably one of the most chilling parts of the movie, because it could have been said and filmed on film 30 years ago, or it could have been said
at a rally. Yeah, you could definitely hear that at a rally. Yeah, today. Absolutely. Yeah. Especially you can't believe, the stuff that you see on TV. Like, that's, yeah.
And I think that if we're looking at this as one of the movies that's beginning at least the cinematic wide release, big pictures, looking back, that broken headstone at the end. And all you see is the death year, 1964. And then underneath it says not forgotten. And just the fact that it's on a desecrated tombstone, because that's what, whenever you're going to persecute anybody, one of the first, it's in the handbook, persecuting people 101, you desecrate their cemetery, right? If you want to go after, if you're anti-Semitic, you go after the, break down headstones that have Stars of David on them. And so that it isn't, there's still this brokenness about the time. They're not wrapping it up in a nice bow for you, because that's not how the movie really ends.
Right.
Even though we're all singing together, black and white together, it's not necessarily a happy ending. And the request is to not forget.
Right. And the thing that I like about the ending on the tombstone is that it shows that it's generational, that it's something that's gone before, something that we continue to live. It's this idea of legacy, generation, all the stuff that Frances McDormand talks about in her monologue. what is your rating out of 5 for Mississippi Burning?
Craig, I'm going to give it a 4. 4 out of 5.
4 out of 5.
That's
what you gave Dangerous Liaisons.
Yeah.
Wow.
What are you giving it?
We are finally divided on a movie.
What are you giving it?
I'm giving it a 2.5.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I was a little down on this movie.
Yeah.
And it's not for content. So we've done a lot of discussion about content. And I think that this movie gets at something really important. And that's not the quibbles that I have with this movie. My problems with the movie, it feels like it's stuck in first gear. Like the whole time. Mm-hmm. It just kind of doesn't, for me anyway, it doesn't shift into a sort of dramatic stakes. It just kind of feels like it's humming along. Mm-hmm. It's like a kid telling you a story, like a little child telling you a story where it's like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. The end. It's just kind of like that.
But I also think that some of it is the relentlessness of the story and of the times. Mm-hmm. That I think I'd also, this might some of how I'm looking at this movie might also have been based off of, I just listened to 2 back-to-back Dollop podcasts on the 74-75 busing riots in Boston. And that inside that resistance by the Southie community and the white communities that did not want to bus, it's just this, we're just going to keep coming at you. We're going to keep coming at you. We're going to keep protesting. We're going to keep throwing rocks. We're going to keep, fights are going to keep breaking. It's just going to keep happening and keep happening. And if we keep doing it enough, then you're eventually just going to leave. Mm-hmm. It's almost like the zealots, Jewish zealots resisting the Roman occupation. Just keep killing Romans. And eventually people are going to leave us alone.
Yeah.
And I think, because, when I'm like, oh, man, it's another thing's on fire. And I felt that way too, right? But I think that I felt like some of that was the relentless mood of what 64 was like. It just keeps happening. And another crappy thing is happening. And the person's dead. And, there seem to be eyes everywhere. And you can't talk to anybody because they're going to come and find you and intimidate you and kill you. Or rough you up in your house and put you in the hospital.
Right.
With 2 people standing there. I think it was that I felt that same monotony, but that I think for me, it spoke to mood.
Okay.
Hashtag mood.
For me, it felt like there was a plot, but that plot didn't seem to drive the actions of the characters. Mm. And that's kind of the missed connection, I think, for me while I was watching it. Would this be nominated for an Oscar today?
It's so of its time.
I can't believe you're thinking about this. I thought that this was an obvious one for me. In that, yes, it absolutely would.
Do you think? I think there would be all kinds of representation problems. It feels like the movie that, even though it feels like it falls short in areas, like it was the movie that people were ready to make in the mid 80s.
I mean,
that we would make a different movie now. I don't know.
You've got 2 movies about race coming next year that we'll likely end up talking about.
Right.
One is the winner of the Academy Award next year. Mm-hmm. Spoilers. Driving Miss Daisy. The other one is a movie that wasn't nominated for Best Picture, which is Do the Right Thing.
Right. And also, if I'm going to put Miss Daisy up against Mississippi Burning,
right?
Boy, we couldn't handle Mississippi Burning. Just couldn't handle it.
Really?
It's too much, right? Too much. So now we're going to go over here. There are no magical black people in this movie who are here to teach you a lesson. They do resist some of that. I think the Aaron Kidd character sometimes gets the closest to that, but you feel the fear.
Here's the note that I wrote, and this may be too cynical for me to include on the show. Green Book proves that the Academy's appetite for white people being heroes of stories about racism will always have a place.
I think you should keep that in. Because it's true. It's true.
I mean, yeah, I would say this would be a problem if Green Book hadn't won the Academy Award just last year. And it's just the same. We keep going down the same cycle of, oh, good for that white guy. He solved it. Good for him. Like, come on, man. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Where does this rank with Oscar-nominated movies from 1989 that we've seen so far? What is your ranking? We have 4 movies. We only need one more. This is so exciting.
So exciting. We're like right on the edge here.
4 movies. So your number 4.
Accidental Tourist. Number 3.
Never coming out of the basement. Accidental Tourist.
It's going to be there the rest of the time, everybody. Then Rain Man.
Rain Man. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Number 3.
Number 2. Because you've scored them the same.
I know. I could go either way.
You could go either way.
Mississippi Burning, number 1, Dangerous Liaisons.
Right. Okay. We are the same, except that I have Rain Man number 2, Mississippi Burning number 3.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'd be curious to see where Working Girl fits, because I've never seen Working Girl. So
it's the one I've seen the most.
Yeah. So there you go. It'll be number 1 for you.
I'm not saying it's going to be number 1, because part of me is like, this is a movie that would come on the USA channel on like a Sunday afternoon, maybe with a few edits.
Right.
But this movie's nominated for an Oscar? Like that is some of what I want to get into.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
So that's our next movie.
Okay.
We're finally at work.
Merry Christmas.
Are you excited, Betsy? Are you excited to finally be one?
Yes. You've been holding me to this alphabetical order nonsense. Okay.
All right. So come back next time.
That's right.
When we finally...
We're going to work it, girl. We're working it.
Betsy,
I'm going to put on my sneakers with my hose. Stockings. Commute to work.
Betsy, thank you for talking about Mississippi Burning with me.
You got it, Greg, anytime.